Government accepts Transport Advisory Committee's proposals to fight traffic congestion. No solution in sight for boundary control facilities at the local express rail link terminal. And in Nepal, a new strong earthquake.
Good evening. The government says it accepts the measures proposed by the Transport Advisory Committee to tackle the problem of traffic congestion in the city. Increasing the first registration tax on new private cars and annual licence fees are among some of the measures proposed. Owen Fung has more.
The number of private cars in Hong Kong is growing at an alarming rate. From 2003 to 2013, the number shot up by 40%. Up until March this year, private cars make up 70% of the registered vehicles in the city, with the total number standing at around 500,000. As a result, congestion has been an endemic problem. A report by the Transport Advisory Committee shows that during peak hours, the travelling speed can be as low as 10 kilometers per hour on major carriageways. The committee earlier proposed 12 measures to reduce congestion. These include increasing the first registration tax on new vehicles, the annual licence fees, and fixed penalties for traffic regulation violations, as well as trying out an electronic road pricing scheme. During a Legislative Council meeting today, the government says it agrees with the committee's recommendations. Some legislators, however, have doubts about the effectiveness of the measures.
Amongst these 12 recommended measures, we can't see any positive incentives for the public to make use of public transport.
Provide a convenient public transport service to public and reduce the incentive to buy their own cars. Why is the government not doing that? Why do you only rely on punitive measures like increasing the FRT to punish the middle class?
Of course, a preemptive approach is one of those, but it is not the only approach. But I think we have to adopt different measures. If there is an ever-growing number of private cars and we don't do anything, we just cannot catch up with the building of roads.
The government also acknowledges that charging drivers in busy areas during peak hours is an effective way to tackle congestion. But given that many people are not familiar with how it operates, the administration promised to explain the measure to the public in detail through a public engagement exercise. Owen Fung, TVB News.
The government has yet to decide on boundary control facilities for the local section of the high-speed rail link. Lawmakers say implementing these immigration services in accordance with the law will be difficult. Rani Samtani reports.
The completion of the $60 billion Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail project has been delayed until 2017. One key aspect, boundary control facilities, has yet to be finalized. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying said the central government supports the idea of having co-location immigration control, but he noted that they were struggling to work out the plans. He stressed it will comply with Hong Kong laws. In 2006, the National People's Congress Standing Committee gave Hong Kong law enforcement staff jurisdiction at the Shenzhen Bay port. But lawmakers noted that under the Basic Law, mainland law enforcement are not permitted to perform immigration control within the SAR. Civic Party lawmaker Ronnie Tong pointed out complications if a traveler is guilty of an offense on the mainland, which does not constitute to an offense in Hong Kong.
If you say he is not entitled to the protection of the law in Hong Kong, then I think the one country, two systems is being seriously challenged. That this is an issue which they cannot resolve unless they were to undermine the one country, two systems.
Pro-establishment lawmakers say there's still a way to achieve the single border clearance.
First of all, it's through local legislation, all right? However, there will be people using judicial review to challenge whether that local piece of legislation is violating the basic law. If the ultimate decision is against this concept, then the Hong Kong government can still go to central government to seek an interpretation of the basic law.
Both supporters and opponents of the co-location arrangement urge the government to handle the matter quickly as it involves complicated legal issues. At the same time, they believe authorities should also be prepared for a need to build separate immigration facilities on the two sides of the border. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying has defended a decision to send officials out onto the streets in support of the government's political reform package. But public support for the plan continues to slide, according to a survey by local universities. Winner Wong reports.
The latest opinion poll by 3 universities shows a declining trend in support of the government's political reform package. And time is running out. The proposal will be brought before the Legislative Council next month. Meeting the press before his weekly Executive Council meeting this morning, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying was asked whether this reflected badly on his administration's strategy to send officials out into the community. But Leung brushed aside the questions, saying different organizations have different methods of surveying people, but they are all worth referencing. Instead, the CE raised a question to the Pan Democrats, who have vowed to veto the reform package in LegCo. If some people want to veto the package, what then happens after? Speaking to TVB, legal sector lawmaker Dennis Kwok believes the next LegCo elections will determine what happens.
If we vote it down and we come back in 2016 election strong with a stronger number of seats than ever, then that is the clearest message that the Hong Kong people would send to the Central People's Government, that we do not accept the 831 decision. Now, politically and legally, they have to go back and consider. And never say never in politics.
He believes lawmakers have the responsibility to vote it down because their voters chose them for their principles in the first place. Winner Wong, TVB News.
Turning overseas, another massive earthquake has struck Nepal. This one registered at 7.3 on the Richter scale and has killed at least 19 people so far. Quake evacuees in Kathmandu, who've been staying in temporary housing and tents, ran out onto the streets in terror. The US Geological Survey confirmed the quake was centered close to Mount Everest and the border with Tibet. The tremor was felt as far away as New Delhi and Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. Last month's quake killed more than 8,000 people and injured more than 17,000. It was recorded at 7.8 magnitude, almost 6 times stronger than today's quake. Authorities warn today's quake has the potential to cause significant damage and landslides.
Typhoon Nol has slammed into Japan's southern islands with heavy rain and winds after pummeling coastal areas on the northeastern tip of the Philippines. Flights from the main Okinawa International Airport in Naha have been cancelled. Officials have issued warnings for heavy rainfall and powerful waves along the coastlines. In the Philippines, 2 men died of electrocution when the typhoon made landfall in the province of Cagayan, about 400 kilometers north of the capital, Manila. The storm disrupted traffic, toppled trees and cut power in wide areas of the province. Nol is forecast to hit mainland Japan later tonight.
Well, the Philippine military is vowing to defend islands it claims in the South China Sea. To emphasize the point, a top Philippine military official has made a special trip to one of the islands claimed by both the Philippines and China. James Aiken reports.
With journalists and other military officials in tow, a top military commander left little doubt about the political statement being made by his visit to the island of Pagasa.
Pag-asa is a municipality of Palawan, and Palawan is a province of the Republic of the Philippines. Therefore, Pag-asa is a territory of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 37-hectare island is almost 500 kilometers west of Palawan and is the biggest of the Philippine-claimed part of the disputed Spratlys archipelago. It's home to a small number of Philippine troops and about 100 residents who live there on government subsidies. Beijing claimed sovereignty over almost all of the resource-rich waters in the region, which overlaps with claims from Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and the Philippines. A UN tribunal has yet to hear a 2013 challenge filed against China's claims. China's rapid reclamation in the region has alarmed its neighbors and drawn growing international criticism. A recent U.S. report says China has begun transitioning from dredging operations to infrastructure development. The work is being done so fast that analysts say China will soon be able to extend the range of its armed forces.
There will be refueling stations there for ships and even the new aircraft carrier. It's really a major base, what they're doing.
Analysts suspect China is attempting to build choke points in the Spratlys that would narrow the passages for marine traffic. China brushes off the accusations. Instead, it accuses its neighbors of carrying out illegal building work in the same territory. Meanwhile, a joint military exercise between Japan and the Philippines was scheduled for today in Philippine waters. The exercise is part of an agreement signed in January by both countries to tighten security cooperation. James Aiken, TVB News.
Elsewhere in Southeast Asia, a ship carrying hundreds of Rohingya Muslims has sent out a distress call saying they were abandoned by their captain without fuel and had been without food or water for 3 days. It's the latest ship carrying migrants from Myanmar and Bangladesh who have either sent out distress calls or washed ashore in Malaysia and Indonesia after getting abandoned by their crew.
It's not just Europe. Southeast Asia is also grappling with its own migrant crisis from some of the world's poorest regions. In this case, it's people desperately trying to get from Bangladesh and Myanmar to Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia. Hundreds of migrants abandoned in ships by smugglers have reached land in relative safety over the past 2 days, but an estimated 6,000 Bangladeshis and Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar remain trapped in crowded wooden boats. With food and water running low, some could be in grave danger. Worried that boats will start washing ashore with dead bodies, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, officials from the United States, other countries and aid organizations have held emergency meetings about the deteriorating situation. So far, though, no plans for a coordinated rescue mission in the Malacca Strait. One of the concerns is what to do with the waves of Rohingyas who have reached the shores of Indonesia and Malaysia. Members of this Muslim minority group are denied citizenship in Myanmar, so they are effectively stateless. But authorities in places like Indonesia, Malaysia and Thailand fear they will set a precedent in allowing them to settle and trigger a tide of migrants wanting to make the dangerous journey across the Bay of Bengal. The Rohingyas have for decades suffered from state-sanctioned discrimination in Buddhist-majority Myanmar. The country considers them illegal settlers from Bangladesh, even though their families have lived there for generations.
France's president has called for an end to a U.S. trade embargo against Cuba during a visit to the country. François Hollande also vowed to strengthen political and economic ties with the Caribbean island. Sonia Otero reports.
François Hollande's historic trip made him the first French president to visit Cuba since it became an independent country. France has joined the Netherlands and Spain in leading a European Union push to normalize relations with Cuba, suspended in 2003. To show France's sincerity, Hollande brought a large contingent of French executives to help strengthen business and diplomatic ties with the island nation.
Je viens dans un contexte qui est...
In order to accomplish that, he urged the U.S. to lift its embargo, saying Cuba deserves a second chance. Of agreements signed during the visit, a French shipping company consented to operate a logistics center at the heart of a special development zone in Cuba.
Viva Cuba! Viva Francia! Viva!
Making every moment of his brief trip count, Hollande spoke with key leaders, starting with President Raul Castro. Then he met for an hour with Raul's brother, retired President Fidel Castro. Hollande admitted the revolutionary leader appeared physically deteriorated. Still, the two discussed local concerns over agriculture and sanctions. Next, Hollande was treated to a tour of the Alliance Francaise in Havana, where students sang the French national anthem. Then he was off to award Cuban Cardinal Jaime Ortega with France's highest national honor.
Vous avez également été un messager.
He said the Cardinal's mediation helped normalize relations between Cuba and the U.S. Paris, for its part, has long maintained financial interests in Cuba, including its holding of Cuban debt. In total, trade between Paris and Havana totals some $400 million.